What is going on? Welcome back to the Dad Wise podcast. I am excited to bring this episode to you guys today, talking with Geoff from the Dad Strength podcast. He is a fitness coach and father, and we covered fitness, obviously, how to stay present, and all sorts of other things in the fatherhood realm, mental health, physical health. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And here we go. All right. Welcome to the Dad Wise podcast. I'm here with Geoff today, talking about some fatherhood stuff. Geoff runs the Dad Strength Instagram and podcast, and you also own a business. What's your gym called? I was looking you up the other day. Yeah.
Oh, let's go right to the plug. I like it. Bang Personal Training.
Bang, is that it? Cool.
Yeah.
And you're in Toronto, right?
That's right.
Cool. Will you just start off, kind of give us a background of who you are, where you're at, how many kids you have, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I am 47. I have one child. My son is about to turn 7.
Okay.
Our business, so Bang, just celebrated its 15th anniversary.
Nice.
And so, which is like dog's ears in, I think, for any independent
business. It's a long
business,
time for a small business owner. Yeah.
Yeah. Fitness industries were pretty hit by COVID.
Right.
Going back, I was never a gym guy. I was always into movement. I discovered martial arts when I was a teenager and fell in love with that. And I think for me, I just kind of recognized that I think better, I feel better when I'm moving a lot. I moved to Toronto in 2002, got back into martial arts, and remember thinking, man, it's really important that I'm able to do this as an old man. It's a big deal. How can I do that? And I wanted to sort of reverse engineer that. And so that's what took me down the path of strength and conditioning. Yeah. And then when my wife was pregnant, I started playing around with the idea of dad strength, and pretty straightforward. I wanted to be a good dad and not, make any egregious errors. I think, a good friend of mine, when my son was first born, he said, look, we all screw up our kids. Like it's inevitable. So, don't stress about it. Just, do what you can.
Degrees. How much are you going to screw them up? You want to keep it to a minimum. Yeah.
Yeah. Or we do. Well,
that's awesome.
Some people seem to take deliberate effort in that direction. And, and I think we all parent also as in part as a reaction to the way that we were parented, what we feel we were missing. And I don't think that always tracks necessarily to your kid. So we might be solving problems where they have something different because of who they are and the differences, whether it's genetics, upbringing, whatever. I launched the Dad Strength podcast about a year and a half ago, as a way to, I'm sure much like you do, like this is a way to have conversations with people. Right. You want to get into
it's a good excuse to just be talking about, it's more for me than it is for anyone else,
100%. I've come to believe our work should be in part our therapy. Right.
That's awesome.
And then I've tried to build for our community and just kind of not go over the top or not try to build anything overly elaborate or complex, but instead just kind of ask, well, what do people want? I've got a community of dads I work with. So we started, I guess near the end of last year, running weekly group calls, and we talk about this stuff. Okay. And I think it's kind of, as I've tried to understand what it is and where all that energy comes from, I think that once upon a time, we used to maybe circle up around a campfire if we were all in the same village.
Sure.
And we'd share, the kids go to bed and maybe the dads share wisdom. They listen to each other. And I don't think we need to be hyper local in the same way anymore. So I think instead we can look for people we're aligned with, where we share the same values. And once we've kind of cleared that, there's no weirdness, there's no awkwardness, because we care about the same stuff and are going in the same direction. We can really, we just jump right into it.
I love it. Yeah. Being a dad can be pretty isolating. And so having that community is super helpful. So that's great. Is it open for any dad to join? Is it a Zoom call, or how does it work?
Yeah, we do a weekly Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Zoom call. We do
Okay.
some
Cool.
in-person stuff too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm going to tell you. I haven't told anybody else yet. I'm going to start running some monthly dinners as well as a way
Okay.
as another way to have in-person stuff.
Cool.
And it's great. Yeah, you can go to dadstrength.com and check it out. I have a little manifesto there,
Yeah.
so you can go.
Nice.
Are these guys my style?
Yeah.
We may be, we may not be. That's all good.
I like it. Cool. So you said you have a 7-year-old son, is that right?
Just about. Yeah. 4 more days.
Almost 7. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, my son turned 7 in December, so he's my oldest. I got 3 of them. But how have you been able to include him in some of this movement stuff and martial arts, or have you been able to invite him into that yet?
Yeah, he does. He trains jujitsu at the same place I do.
Yeah. Cool.
And so he'll go one or two times a week,
Yeah.
and that's been wonderful. He doesn't really care that much, but he has a good
Okay.
time, and it's for at that level, it's more sort of physical literacy and just doing
Sure.
the things. He doesn't when he comes to the gym, he doesn't care about lifting weights. He's not trying to do clean
He's
and
not trying to
jerks
bulk
or
up right
anything.
now.
Yeah, so we play around, we mess around in our own way, and
Yeah.
it's usually kind of creative and silly, and
Yeah.
it's all good. I don't think things have to be very regimented for kids.
Right. Yeah, I found that with my son, just getting him active is super helpful. So to get him moving and outside, and we've only done 2 sessions of jujitsu so far, but we had him in Taekwondo for a while. But then I felt like I wanted to get him more like hand to hand, like actually grappling with people and actually touching and getting on the ground. Taekwondo tended to be more like striking poses and kind of getting kind of the basics done. But first day of jiu-jitsu, they're like, all right, get on top of each other. And so it's pretty great. He loves just being active, and I'm trying to find a punching bag for him too to set up in the basement
nice.
so he can
Yeah.
blow off some
anything
steam
that
if he
works.
needs to.
Isaac,
Nice.
I hope you edit these, because I got to do a quick pause.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you're good.
Definitely.
So you guys just do personal training at your gym? Is that kind of the focus?
Yeah, we have sort of what I think is a really interesting model, and an effective model, and that is we do offer one-on-one, but our main thing is group personal training. So we will have up to 5 people with a coach, but
Nice.
Everyone has their own program. So you're sharing that. So and I think about how we coach movement and how people learn the best, and I don't think it's from being micromanaged. So I think our job as coaches is to say, okay, what's the hardest thing that you can do well? Give you one of those things. And then if you're doing great, to let you be and just let it cook. But if something's up, if it doesn't feel right, if you have a question, if it's time to kind of play around with some alternatives, then the coach is right there. And so it's a nice combination. It's sort of like a scaffolded, that would be like a new school sort of term for pedagogy, but it's a scaffolded environment to learn. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I haven't heard of many gyms that do that. If I was to Google one in my area, what would that be called? A gym like yours.
So the most common term, which we don't use, is semi-private training.
Semi-private. Okay.
I don't know when it's great to be semi anything, but so we've always struggled. We used to call it hybrid training. We call it now group personal training, and it's really actually kind of tough to capture.
Sure.
So that's always been one of the marketing challenges.
Yeah, you got to coach people in what you're actually doing. Cool. Yeah, I've been doing CrossFit for the last about a year, and it's kind of the same idea, but it's more you do kind of all do the same workout, bigger group, but yeah, I try to take it easy. I know a lot of people get hurt doing CrossFit, but I've got shoulder issues, so I just kind of keep it all nothing overhead. So, but
yeah, not everybody's designed, or at least is ready to go fully overhead. Not everybody's built to do a super deep squat. And so being able to look at your morphology, like what does your body do? What are the places it's happy?
Yeah.
We want to focus on that. People get overhead, even if their shoulders can't go there. And usually that means, really cranking on the back, for example. So figuring out how to adjust is a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you always did you get like a degree in movement? Is it called kinesiology or?
Kinesiology.
Did you just kind of?
No.
Yeah.
No, I studied Chinese.
Okay.
It was, this was a later in life thing. And I think, like I said, movement had always just been really important to my mental well-being. And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of, I guess I have a researching bent to myself. So I
Yeah.
started digging into it, and it kind of started as a career because I was just reading, and I was kind of astonished at how interesting I found it. I thought it was going to be really dry
Yeah.
material. And I
Yeah.
remember asking a friend who was a personal trainer, some question. I don't remember what it was. She's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Nobody, why aren't you doing this for a living? You know more than the people I work with, which
That's
wasn't
awesome.
100%. I knew a lot of stuff, and there was even much more that I didn't know, but
Yeah.
it was enough to go, okay, well, maybe I'll investigate that. I'd never in a million years thought that would be a sort of a vocational direction.
Yeah. What were you doing before you started your own
I was
gym?
a freelance writer.
Okay. Cool. So you've
Yeah.
been kind of setting your own schedule and being an entrepreneur for a long time.
I Yeah, I don't think, honestly, I'm really capable of working on somebody else's schedule. I'm not capable of doing things that I don't care a lot about. And
Yeah.
that's been both, kind of a curse. But it's a blessing. It's great because it's allowed me to get here. But
Yeah.
it's created all kinds of friction along the way too.
Yeah. How have you balanced or thought about like work life balance in that way? Because I know owning your own business, it can really can be like its own child. Like it can take
Yeah, yeah.
a
I
lot of
describe this as
your
my first
mind
child.
space. Yeah.
I think if you're an entrepreneur, I think if you are starting a thing, we just have to agree it's not going to be balanced. You're going to work a
Yeah.
ridiculous number of hours, and it's our own stupid optimism that propels us into these situations, right? I had no idea how much I didn't know, how many things that I would have to learn. And so, in the
Yeah.
early years, I was working, I don't know, 60-hour weeks. I was pretty, and to the point where I got pretty burnt out.
Yeah.
I think most of the time, like what is entrepreneurship? It's taking whatever
Right.
assets you have and leveraging or maybe over leveraging them. So if you have a little money, use it all. You don't have a buffer. If you have a lot of money,
Yeah.
well, again, you use it all and probably then some. If you have a little time, you invest it all. If you have a lot of time, you invest it all. And so getting over that hump, I kind of feel like if the day you get your small business license or whatever it is, or not a small, there's
Yeah.
no such thing, but you get your business
Medium.
license, you should just be assigned a therapist. And that will do a lot of good. When I meet people who are like young entrepreneurs, I really try to get them into some kind of self-care.
Yeah.
Um, whatever minimum viable product, even if it's minutes a day, just to have that
Yeah.
in process, what I call being preloaded. So they're a little readier, like when an opportunity opens up to take the next step, or maybe they're
Yeah.
like, I have no time to exercise. Okay, well, do
Yeah.
some mobility, do some maintenance, check in with your body daily, so that when
Yeah.
a day finally opens up where you can move, you don't go, what I really need is a physical therapist, or some kind of intensive therapeutic approach. So you're ready
Yeah.
to just start. Hmm.
Right. Yeah. I was like, when was thinking about starting CrossFit, I was like, I'm gonna start running at least before I just jump in fully. So I like did 3 or 4 months of just kind of running every other day and trying to get my body back in. Because I was stagnant for probably 5 or 6 years where I was just kind of working at a desk, and um, I've just found that since like getting active and moving like every other day, I've just felt better all around. Like my parenting is better, my sex life is better, my mood is better, I'm doing better at work. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about how that works, and I mean how you encourage people into that?
So I don't think, at this point in time, it's a controversial statement to say exercise is good for you, and you'll probably feel better if you
Yeah.
do some. So, and I feel like a lot of my career over the last 15 plus years has been asking the question of why do we struggle to do the things that we know are good for us, right? So
Right.
it's not an intellectual issue, it's not a knowledge issue. So what gets
Yeah.
in the way? And I think there are a couple of things. One of those things is expectations.
Hmm.
Maybe what we built up in our mind through or exposure to media, or maybe we had a terrible time in like high school gym, and we
Yeah.
don't know there's another way to do things. There's a way that's actually congruent with the kind of person you are and the way that you roll. The other thing
Yeah.
is, I think most of the time we need to zoom out a little bit and look at things through a systems lens. What we like to do is over-index on one quality. So when we look at health, kind of big picture health, exercise is part of that. It's a really important part of it. Some kind of movement. In the same way, we could say that financial health is part of it, right? If you don't have a place to stay, if you don't have food to eat, that's a big problem. However, we tend to over-index on these things. We're like, money is going to solve all of my problems, or if I just get hyper fit, that's going to solve all of my problems. If your sleep is trash, if your relationships are toxic and are stressful, if the work you do is wildly out of alignment with your values as a person, right? If you don't have a community, if you don't have people to talk to and have space for you and listen to you and kind of share, if you're not moving, if you're not getting exposure to nature, there are all these things. So I'm not looking. I think dads are too busy to get an A grade most of the time in these things. Maybe we've got room in our lives for one domain or two domains, but we can't hit everything. So instead, my question is more, what's our minimum viable product? What is sufficiency? What is, what kind of nutrition is good enough? What kind of movement and exercise is good enough? What kind of relationships are good enough to just clear the barriers to good health? So it's not a guarantee, but at least we're getting rid of the major sort of tire fires.
Yeah, baby steps. And it says on your site that you're a tiny habits coach. Is that kind of that philosophy? It sounds like it's in line with, I don't know anything about it, but is that kind of the same idea, or is that a whole different ballgame?
Yeah, it's related. Tiny Habits comes out of the Stanford Behavior Design Lab. BJ Fogg is a professor there, and he teaches this stuff. So he teaches behavior design for groups or for organizations, and Tiny Habits is sort of the individual approach. And I guess I would articulate it like this. We tend to think that we always have to do these big things, and we're looking for big dramatic change. And most, it's very appealing. And a lot of times we tend to just write off the value of tiny things, of doing, small change. And so I'll just sort of insert the caveat here that, hey, if you want to do a really big thing, you should go do that. But there's only so much room in your life, and you can't have, you're not going to juggle like multiple huge life-changing things. If it's dramatically important to you that you change your environment, you can move, right? You can do a career change. You can do all these things, but that's gonna eat up most of your available bandwidth. So what do we do with the rest of the stuff? And we need a version of action. So the way I would explain this now is, when we think of discipline, usually we think about grit or determination or just kind of toughing our way through adversity. But I think there's another form of discipline. It's to ask the question, how easy do I need to make these things? Because you have the power to move the goalposts. You're making these rules up. They're not real. They're just construct. You made them up. So what if you continue to move the goalposts until you were highly successful in practice of a tiny action, whatever it is? I would say minimum 95% of the time you are winning at that thing. And if you're doing that, if you're not doing that, don't raise the stakes, don't move the goalposts. And even if you are, you slow cook that again. And so the discipline here is actually being able to identify what level of complexity, of difficulty you can operate at highly successfully. So that's the discipline. It's pinpointing those places, because if you know what those boundaries are, you understand, you can think about it more systematically. When are things not working? And if they're not working, how do I troubleshoot them?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I read a Dave Ramsey book way back in the day about like the debt snowball, and he says like tackle your smallest debt first. He's like, it doesn't make financial sense. You should tackle the one with the highest percentage. But he's like, psychologically, if you can get one little win financially, where like I killed that debt, like I cut up that credit card and I paid it all off. He's like, you can get it. Like the psychological part of it is more important than the number. Like if you crunch the numbers, it makes more sense to tackle the big one first. But he's like, get some wins under your belt and then take steps towards whatever it is. Finances is his thing, but
it's
any
such
category,
a great example, because we operate, we pretend as if we're completely rational, and that emotions, like everybody will acknowledge that emotions are real, and they play a
Right.
part in, in our experience and everything. However, we don't tend to design systems with
Yeah.
emotions in mind. And to my ADHD homies out there, I would highly suggest you consider designing for feels, designing for emotion. How do you want to feel
Yeah.
during the day? Because your ability to perform well
Yeah.
is probably less. We know what your abilities are, and there's some kind of harder limits to that, but more likely they're
Yeah.
influenced by what's your mood like, what's your energy like, what's your ability to focus like. So to design for the kind of way you want to feel, I think, is a completely different lens and can be profound.
Yeah. How would you say do you have any like tools or resources for someone who's like, man, I want to design my life. Like I know I'm not winning in most categories and I want to make a shift. Is there like a book or a life design plan that that you've used that can
Huh.
help people think through this? Because it's hard when you're like, I want to get more fit, I want to make more money, I want to be a better dad, I want to be a better husband. It's like, how do we, especially I'm more type B, I guess. So I kind of move as I feel. I'm not very linear. And so
Yeah.
have you run into anything that would be helpful for like designing a life plan, or I don't even know what you would call it, but to set goals in
Yeah.
that kind of way, I guess. Yeah.
I think maybe there are a few different ways to think about this, because
Yeah.
the temptation is to jump right into tactics, right? And they're
Yeah.
great people, and Dave Ramsey is an example. On the financial side, they're great people to pay attention to. But what are the almost the meta qualities or the meta habits involved in doing
Yeah.
all this stuff? The meta habit I prescribe for fathers, or at least sort of advocate for, is to be present,
Yeah.
right? Because you can read all the books and you can, you can do all the research, but at the end of the day, are you there? Are you
Yeah.
emotionally, intellectually, physically present? Are you distracted and stressed?
Yeah.
And so how do we get there? And I think that is, kind of foundationally what Dad Strength is about. So how do we clear the barriers
Yeah.
of presence? So again, the first stuff I would look at is health. It's hard to
Yeah.
do any of these things well. You can do them well for a short time, for a sprint, but to do this stuff sustainably, you have to have sufficiency in these domains of health. I would highly recommend Tiny Habits. I think it's a tremendous. It's more than just sort of a collection of tactics. It is a system.
Yeah.
Another book I'm revisiting right now is Principles from Ray
Okay.
Dalio, who and it's, again, it's sort of, I think we can orient by principles. I think you have to know what your values are. I think you have to
Yeah.
know what your, and when I say values, I don't mean like, oh, I support that when it costs me nothing. I mean, like,
Yeah.
what do you put skin in the game for? What do you care about?
Yeah.
What will you invest time or money or attention or discomfort? All these things that have a real cost. Where do you put skin in the game?
Yeah.
And so I think you have to know what your principles are. Like, how do I want to operate in this world?
Yeah.
And then I think you have to do a really thoughtful inventory of, where am I right now? Not where do I want to be, not as what some future version
Yeah.
of my life, what's that supposed to be, or when things calm down for me, or I have more time or more money or more energy. Like, just right now, be
Yeah.
pragmatic and go, what is a version of action where I can just, even if it doesn't really move the needle in an appreciable way, where I can signal, it's a statement to yourself as much as to anyone else. This is something I believe in, and this is the
Yeah.
direction that I want to move. So using a combination, I think, of principles-based thinking and Tiny Habits as a sort of minimum viable product for action,
Yeah.
I think can be really powerful.
Yeah. And then you've talked a lot about, or not a lot, but you've mentioned accountability, and we talked about it at the very beginning of the podcast. How does accountability play into this process, and how do you come alongside when you're coaching? And if I'm trying to keep someone accountable, what kind of tips would you give me to approach them in that, or to keep myself accountable?
Yeah, accountability is kind of a dangerous word.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's always clearly defined. And I
Yeah.
think when you hear accountability, most of the time, the assumption is someone's going to be like checking on me, or maybe nudging me or pestering me
Yeah.
if I don't do the thing. I'm
Yeah.
going to get some grief about it. I'm going to get, and maybe it's like positive, maybe it's tough love, but there's still some level of pressure. And I'm not sure that really works for most people in a sustainable way. I think there's sort of, it can burn dirty. So when we think about accountability, and this is going back, we had our most recent call for Dad Strength. This is something we really kind of got into and interrogated.
Cool.
And what we agreed on as a group was, well, accountability has to be tempered with compassion. It has to be tempered with curiosity. And I think in the same way, if you sort of state, so here we are in a safe environment, like in an emotionally safe environment, you're supported, people have your back, right? And then you say, hey, this is a value for me and this is what I'm going to try to do.
Yeah.
So if you move forward, people are rooting for you, and that's great. And maybe learning from you, or may have some advice or, or thoughts. But if, let's say you drop the ball or you fail, what happens? I think the same group should be curious. They should want to know what went wrong, and how do you, maybe it was something you didn't do that was within your ability, but often we're very bad at estimating what we can be successful at.
Sure.
We are very, we are, so I think, people listening to this will relate to the idea that often you go, okay, I'm going to completely turn X around. I'm going to make a huge shift here.
Yeah.
Right. And it feels profound, but the first time something goes wrong or they don't do it, they're like, I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
I just one more piece of evidence to verify that I can't do anything. And it's like, no, you chose you chose terribly. You needed to be a lot more humble in what you went after. So first show yourself a version of action that you'd be consistently successful with. And then from there, begin to design and innovate. But you've got to know what those markers are.
Yeah. I tend to be highly optimistic. Even like with house projects, I'm like, this should only take me about an hour to remodel the kitchen or whatever. It's like 4 weeks later, like, okay, we ran into some issues with that. Or like, I'm just going to never get angry with my kids again. And then, that can last maybe an hour or two.
Glass shatters, and you feel your blood pressure surge. Yeah. You have to be able to go, wow, okay, now that I've made this time estimate, let me just think back for a second. Take 20 seconds to think historically. How good am I at estimating time to completion? Okay.
Yeah.
And you may not, even that time, you might go, okay, well, I'm going to adjust this 20% when in reality you needed to adjust it like 300%. But okay, it's a process. Yeah.
Yeah. My wife's been great. That's kind of built-in accountability is when you're married. She's like, let's plan to not use the kitchen for at least 2 or 3 weeks. Like, all right, fine. But if we get done earlier, we'll be pleasantly surprised. So for presents, do you have some like thoughts and tips on how to stay present as a dad? Because I know the traditional dad like comes home from work, flips on the tube, and like zones out, or at least like is present, but their mind is off. And I find myself doing that a lot, where I'm in the room, but I'm like workshopping something in my mind, or I'm troubleshooting a problem at work or something and replaying conversations. Do you have ways or thoughts on how to like be in the moment and stay present with your children and wife and life in general?
Yeah, it's hard, and it's kind of an abstract thing to say.
Yeah.
And, again, are your health behaviors sufficient to at least ensure that you're not, a dumpster fire of a human being? It's hard to be present. If you're hyper stressed and you're a metabolic catastrophe and you've got 18 projects on the go and no time to do anything, and you're getting into fights at work or at home or wherever else. It's like, those are all going to get in the way of being present. And so clearing that doesn't guarantee presence, but I think it clears up bandwidth. And then from there, the most common, and I think the most practical advice on mindfulness is to start with a breath. It's always there with you, right? So when we talk about tiny habits, right, we want to design with a prompt in mind. Okay, when I notice that I'm distracted, after I notice that I'm emotional or angry, you have to notice first, right? And after that, you take an action. And if your
Hmm.
action is after after I notice I'm stressed, and you say I'm going to run 10 kilometers or whatever, that might not always be doable, right?
Yeah.
Or I'll get a great night's sleep, and maybe you will. You can,
Yeah.
maybe there's an action you can do to facilitate that, but in the moment, what you can do is you can focus on a breath. You can focus on your physical experience. What do I feel? I believe that it is very hard for us to process um, the present moment. It is a very abstract,
Hmm.
kind of high level thing, but physical sensation
Yeah.
is as close a conduit to the present moment as you can possibly get. So if
Yeah.
it's something you're feeling, if it's your feet on the ground, if it's your bum in the seat, if it's you squeezing your hands and releasing, these are all things that you're getting in pretty much in real time. And so that's
Yeah.
when, if you're wondering where right now is, that's where it is. And we can
Yeah.
get out of our kind of spiraling cognition and come back to our felt sort of physical sense.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's been a big thing in my life, just realizing my wife would always ask me how I'm feeling. I'm like, I don't know, my stomach hurts. Or like, I feel like my shoulders are tight. And so I'm like, I don't know what emotion that is, but it
Yeah.
hurts here and here. So
Men
I
are
wasn't
not
trained.
given,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
men are not given a rich emotional vocabulary to draw from, right?
Yeah.
Most people, most guys kind of range from, oh, okay, I guess, fine, to, I don't know, everything
Tired,
sucks,
hungry.
tired,
Yeah.
hungry. I'll tell you what I'm mad at. I'll tell you what's
Yeah.
bothering me. I can let you
Yeah.
know the things that are vexing to me.
Yeah.
But tuning into positive emotion,
Yeah.
right, is not always is it's a very trainable skill. And some people are reluctant to do it, but it's like, are you trying to feel good? Like, do you want to feel good in your life? Would you like to know what that looks like so you can identify
Yeah.
when that pops up and design for more of that? And it doesn't have to be, not everything has to be designed around happiness, which again, I think kind of ephemeral, but you can design
Yeah.
around meaning. You
Yeah.
can, you can design around, again, your values. And if you're doing those things, it turns out that when you're doing something that has a real personal significance, you don't mind the work. Like, you
Yeah.
watch kids play, right? And they're running around and they're dropping into squats and they're hanging off of stuff. And you watch a bunch of 7-year-olds and nobody has to tell them to do anything or to be, move
No.
or count sets or reps.
Yeah.
There's an inherent energy there because more than they don't notice fatigue. Or maybe even a
Right.
better example is like a I don't know, 9-month baby who's
Yeah.
trying to get around. The physical effort has to be profound. That's, you think CrossFit's tough. Try being a little better, right? Trying to move around, but they
Yeah.
don't care because they are so hungry to explore and move. There's a deeper version propelling them beyond any kind of sense of fatigue or allowing that to mess with what is really important to them.
Yeah. I mean, they'll just go until they drop. Like my
Yeah,
my
yeah.
7-year-old just hits the bed sometimes and he's out. So, um, yeah, that's awesome. Um, do you have like any pain points right now in your parenting? What are you working through with your son, and kind of what are some of the biggest struggles you found in this season of your life as a father?
So I feel like I hit the lotto with our kid,
Yeah,
and I'm super grateful. So these are all minor things. I
sure.
wish I could get him to eat more. He's not an eater. He
More.
doesn't want to
Okay.
experiment with stuff. He does not. He is not a culinary adventurer, to say the
Okay.
least. So often mornings, it's just a struggle to get him to eat enough. And now that he's doing more physical activities, I'm like, you
Yeah.
gotta, buddy, you gotta
Fill
eat like
up.
an athlete.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Cool.
He likes stuff. He loves getting stuff. He loves getting
Okay.
gifts and things. Does he
Yeah.
remember them once he's received them? I can't
Yeah.
tell you. So just like taking a moment to maybe, working on gratitude, working on just
Sure.
playing with, appreciating the things you have, not constantly be focused on what you don't have. We've worked on that. We talked through it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's all small potatoes. Everybody's healthy, thankfully.
Right.
Everybody's happy, and I'm just trying to mess them up as minimally as possible.
That's awesome. Uh, did you guys choose to have kids later in life, or was that a decision you made, or just circumstances?
Oh man. Yeah, I never I was kind of surprised. In fact, my wife was the one who pushed to have a kid, and I was like, I don't know, I'm not,
Yeah,
I didn't feel ready. I'd never felt ready, and I kind of
yeah,
recognized, wow, I'll never feel ready.
yeah,
But all right, let's do a thing. I
yeah,
trusted her enough that I knew even if I completely dropped the ball, as a human, as a father, she would do great. And so we took that leap, and it's been profound for me because I've never loved anybody like I love
hmm,
him.
yeah,
It's changed the way I think about things. A lot of what we do when I connect with him through play, through just chatting, whatever. Um, it's almost like opening up a channel back
hmm,
to when I was a kid. So I don't know about, feels a little woo to talk about inner child stuff,
sure,
but I do feel like there are things that, schemas, I guess. There are things we came to believe as kids,
yeah,
um, with our little undeveloped brains that just sat in there and never got reinvestigated or re-explored. And now,
yeah,
with I believe fully developed prefrontal cortex, I can come back, and when I re-explore those things, I'm able
hmm,
to. It's almost like going back in time. It's like finding yourself in a tense moment and traveling through a time machine to give yourself a back rub. You're cool.
yeah.
It's gonna be all right. And so it's been really therapeutic in that way.
Yeah, I was reading a book, I don't remember which one, but they said like the most people who go to therapy are like women when they start to have children. So like they'll hit the age where they experience some sort of trauma or difficulty in their life. When their kids hit that age, that's when they start going to explore their own story back because they're like, I see myself in my child, and to unpack all of your stuff, it just comes to the surface again. They're like, oh yeah, I this happened, or I wish I was parented different. And you kind of said that you're reverse engineering your own childhood a lot of times when you're parenting, and
Yeah.
it does totally bring up a lot, and it takes a lot of emotional energy to kind of go back there and start exploring that story again.
Yeah, agreed. I'll tell you one thing that I believe. I don't know if it's true, but I believe it. And that is, it is less important for you to have all your stuff sorted out, as an adult, kind of modeling, leading for a child, than it is for them to see you encounter a difficulty, encounter a challenge, could be emotionally, intellectually, whatever area of your life, and find a way to deal with it in a healthy
Yeah.
way. I think that, there's a pain expert I refer to a lot, and he once said in a seminar I attended, um, the doing is the fixing.
Hmm.
And for stuff like this, I really believe that. So we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to have it all sorted out. But when we see these things, and there's your tiny habit, right? In this case,
Yeah.
or your framework there, and that is when you see these things, when you notice them, you don't have to do a big thing, but
Yeah.
just respond to it. Take some kind of action, um, as a value statement. And often we do small things as best we can, and don't realize that by doing a small thing consistently well over long enough a time, it becomes, it's subcortical. It becomes internalized. You don't have
Yeah.
to think through it, and that opens up the door to do your next little thing. And so your ability to process in the moment, um, can radically alter over time. It doesn't feel that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I just in all my processing of becoming a dad and learning about fatherhood, I've just had a lot of stuff with my own dad where I've like, man, I wish he would have done better or done more or been present. He was the classic, kind of tune out, vacant at the dinner
Yeah.
table or watching TV. And so I read a book, Intentional Father, and he was like, just write your dad a letter and like thank him for everything good he did. And so like to stop
Yeah.
dwelling on that negative stuff and just think of all the positives that he built into you. And the point was like if you're carrying all this baggage into your fatherhood, you're gonna pass that baggage down. And so it's good to just let that go, and then you can kind of move forward from there. And so that was a
give them the
healing
same,
practice for me. Yeah.
yeah, the same grace that you're going to want. When it turns out that, who knows, we're just dealing,
Yeah.
like for my dad, for him not to be, like physically abusive with us was a
Yeah.
tremendous generational leap forward. So the
Right.
fact that he was a stress case, because he didn't know, he didn't have the tools to process, he just did it through sheer force of will,
Yeah.
right? And out of love. So he knew what he didn't want, but he'd never been equipped with the things to do the way to do all the things he wanted.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there are very many parents who want to do a bad job. I don't think that's a
No.
thing. I think they try and often are frustrated with themselves when they don't,
Yeah.
when they're lacking a tool, or they don't know how to move forward in a healthy way. But it's not a lack of desire. It's not a lack of motivation. Right?
Yeah. It feels like just recently in the last, I don't know, generation, dads have started actually, or people have started encouraging dads to be good dads. Like it used to be this paradigm where like dads just go to work and you're like, that's enough. Like bring home the bacon and that's kind of your role. And I feel
Yeah.
like just since starting this podcast and the Instagram page, I've been following a bunch of dads, and it's like, hey, we're all trying. Like there's this movement of dads who are kind of pressing into this and trying to be better. And I love that. And there's always been dads in every generation who are trying and doing their best, but
Yeah.
there's been a lot of talk about the importance of dads, and there's all sorts of great resources for dads nowadays to get better and to get equipped to be the best
Yeah.
they can be. And so I
Thank
love
goodness.
watching that.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's a relatively new phenomenon where we see so many people identifying first and foremost as fathers. And
Yeah.
so it feels like progress. It really does. And it's a good, if we agree that we have concerns about how the world is going, you can advocate for policy changes, you can protest, you can yell at people on the internet, or whatever your
Yeah.
preferred mode is, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's our kids that are going to be running the show, right?
Yeah.
And are we equipping them to do that well? Are we equipping them to be good critical thinkers and to be able to handle their own emotions and not just get hoodwinked by manufactured information,
Yeah.
all this stuff, so our ability to be there for them. And I feel like dads, there is no question about moms, and to that end, there's a lot more stuff for them, and for good reason. There are less
Right.
resources for dads. So I'm always, you're doing a thing, I'm doing a thing. And we both
Yeah.
had the good fortune to meet a lot of other men who want to, contribute to this, and dads need it. So we're a great
Yeah.
untapped resource for developing and fostering the next generation of humans. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. How's your experience been with raising an only child? I've talked to a lot of guys who have multiple kids. How has it been raising one? Do you have pros and cons, or thoughts on that?
Well, I don't really have a way to compare. We've never taken
That's
like a
true. You've
second
only
child
done.
for a test run. I know it's less stressful.
Okay.
I know like once, pretty much everyone I've talked to, say 99% of people with two or more kids are like, yeah, you have a second kid, and it's not 10% more. It's more than twice.
Yeah.
So we have, I think, so we get a tag team this kid.
Right.
We get to have conversations with them. It's a little easier to set up boundaries. So I don't really have a basis of comparison.
Sure.
We're downtown Toronto.
Okay.
If maybe, if we were in the burbs, and could really spread out more, we'd say, all right, we'd like to have more kids. It would be, in some ways it would be amazing. But like I said, I feel like we hit the lotto, and maybe we're not going to spin that wheel again. I love spending time with this kid. I love hanging out with him and doing stuff. And so, he asked me to play chess with him this morning. That was so great.
That's awesome.
And so when we had the space, I didn't have to, look after anybody else. I didn't have to put out any fires. So we were able to do that before breakfast, and it was amazing. So I'm,
Yeah,
For
that's
me,
awesome.
it's been great. Yeah.
Yeah. With my son, he wanted to play Risk yesterday, and I was like, we're gonna have
Mm.
to wait for the toddler to go to bed for nap time because he will destroy this game, and you can't even touch the table once all the pieces are out. You're like, we're not gonna
Risk
risk it. So
is a commitment. Yeah.
that was a long haul. It's the Lord of the Rings version, so it was pretty sweet. You move the
Oh.
ring across, and so when the ring leaves the game board, the game's over. So there's like a definite time that it's going to end, which is a nice upgrade, I think, to the Lord of the Rings
Oh, so
version.
the ring is sort of like the clock, like a countdown.
Yeah. Every round you move it, and so once it's done, you just count up your points and stuff, and it's over.
Yeah.
But
Right,
it's a
right in
good.
the fires of Mount Doom. That sounds fantastic.
It's a pretty good one. Yeah. As we kind of get towards the end of this conversation, do you have resources you would point people towards, stuff you're reading? You mentioned one book already.
Mhm.
Just if dads want to kind of dig deeper and move forward, do you have any favorite books you've read or uh, stuff you're into?
Yeah. Um. So yeah, I'll just plus one tiny habit is sort of a foundational thing. You know, it's a very flexible framework that you can apply to anything. I mentioned
Yeah.
principles, which is a way to sort of organize and orient. The kids love the Stoics these
Okay.
days. So these are all sort of meta habits, right? Things that you can incorporate and apply anywhere. I think you need a version of action in the domain of health, right? And
Yeah.
that means exercise, daily movement, nutrition, sleep, stress management. You need something in the financial bucket and in the vocational bucket. So they're related,
Yeah.
but they don't have to be.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think either of us are ready to retire off of our dad money. Yeah, we do this out of love. Um,
Yeah.
so you can have both. Are you? How do we have great conversations? How
Yeah.
do we, explore creatively? How do we build our intellectual health? Like what's gonna build? Rather than again just say okay, read this or do that. I would say like what
Yeah.
allows you to be more present, to stretch out your attention span,
Yeah.
to stretch out your curiosity, to ask like what are some of my best qualities, what are my unique strengths. You could do uh, I don't know if this would be the first go to, but there's Clifton Strengths is a way
Okay.
to explore. So often we do this stuff vocationally. Okay, how
Yeah.
are you going to be a great earner? How are you going to be great at your job?
Yeah.
But look at it personally. What are your
Yeah.
strengths as a human?
Yeah.
What are things that you can do in your life uniquely well? Well, lean into
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah.
What was it called?
Clifton
Strengths,
Strengths. It used to be
Clifton
Strengths
Strengths.
Finder.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the same thing I was going to say. Strengths Finder. I've done
Hmm.
that. I know people have liked the Enneagram thing. They get their number. It helps them kind of understand their bent. There's all sorts
Yeah,
of
yeah.
great
People
tests
like
you can take.
Enneagram and like Myers Briggs, and there are a bunch of other ones that
Yeah,
are not quite as validated, but it's a starting
yeah,
point, right? All you do, you try a thing on. You say this
yeah,
sounds right, and then
yeah,
you'll try it on, and you'll discover actually it's close, but here are the
yeah,
differences. Okay, and then you can calibrate
yeah,
and begin to sort of really know these strengths. I think advice that I wish maybe I got it, but that I'd really been wish I'd been able to onboard better, earlier in life is you don't if there's something you suck at and don't like doing, it doesn't make you a terrible person. You just need to delegate it or get it off your plate ASAP. There are
yeah,
better things you could be doing with your brain, and your
yeah,
attention and your time, and that are going to be a lot more rewarding and a lot more productive for you. Yeah.
yeah. Have you found is like a good way for dads if they're just completely inactive to get started? Like what's a good baby step that you recommend for dads who just want to start down that health trail?
So after you have a little pang, like I should do something else, or I should do more. You think I should,
Yeah,
and maybe you've got this idea like, oh, I'm going to start a 6-week fitness regimen. Just
sure.
stand up, take a breath,
Yeah,
check in with your body. Is something tight? Move it around.
yeah.
Something loose? Squeeze it. Um, you can take small actions. You still energized? Go take a little walk.
Yeah,
Right? Walking's not dramatic, but it's also grossly underrated. Building up moderate intensity activity over the course of the week has a profound long-term effect on your health. So just don't, more than anything else, don't feel like something small doesn't matter, because all this stuff adds up. And if all you do is add movement into your life 30 seconds at a time, get to a point where you might have accumulated a few minutes a day, all distributed throughout the day. And the longest lived people in the world are not gym rats. They are physically active just as a default in their life. I had this realization yesterday. I'd stopped by home. I biked home, and then I was like a few minutes out, and I realized, oh, I forgot something. And my immediate response was, great, I'll get a little bit more biking time in. And I realized right after that, I was like, that might be weird. I think when you're still oriented toward convenience, that a lot of people go, they'd complain and maybe they wouldn't do it, or they'd do it begrudgingly. I'm like, it's a gift. So any physical, unless you, if you're physically, if you labor, if you toil, if you are, if your vocation is a physical one, maybe that's a different story. But if you are a knowledge worker, if you're behind a desk, we have to chase inconvenience. We have to chase physical discomfort, because that's what our bodies are adapted to do. And it's only been about 5 minutes in human history where we don't have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I just finished reading Dopamine Nation, and she talks about the pleasure-pain balance and how it's like we used to always take baths in rivers, and we used to be mostly uncomfortable all the time. And it's just pretty recent in human history where we can work sitting down, where we can shower warm, we can sleep in cozy beds. And so we need to like push a little harder down on that pain scale so we can balance out the pleasure pain. That's a oversimplification of the book, but she's like, you got to kind of seek after some discomfort every once in a while through working out, jumping in some ice, doing whatever. I know ice baths are kind of all the rage right now if you're on Instagram, but I get advertised for ice baths almost every day. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to do that or not, but I might try it out.
Yeah, very, very popular. You feel great coming out, but I mean, there are other things you can do. I think what we're going to find over time is the physical benefit is ambiguous, but the psychological benefit is tremendous, and it is a reminder, people, you can do hard things, and I think people are energized because they realize that coming out, and they can take that into their lives. So yeah,
that's awesome.
You can do
cool
hard things.
That's a good thing to remember. And being a dad is a hard thing, so let's do it. Do you have any parting shots for dads, little tips or one piece of advice you'd give to dads as we close this out?
Gosh, I'll just say that this is what I've been thinking about recently. It is inherently uncomfortable, I think, to be a human, to pay attention. We're often feeling kind of raw or chafed to really be aware of all of the things. And the desire, the reflex is to search for comfort. But like you were talking about, you're just going to be uncomfortable. That's part of the human experience. And so whether you are healthy and uncomfortable, or unhealthy or uncomfortable, whether you're moving toward your values or away from your values, it's all uncomfortable. So when you feel discomfort, know that you know what's important in your life, you've got values, and invite that discomfort along for the ride with you.
I like it. Cool, Geoff. Well, thanks for chatting today. I'll let you get back to your gym so you can follow up that phone call that came in while we were talking.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time today.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks, Isaac.
Yeah.